Hi, I'm Matt Jones. 2 weeks ago, Arkansas had not won a conference championship in 17 years. Now the Razorbacks have won trophies 2 weeks in a row. Arkansas followed up its regular season title in the SEC with a sweep at the conference tournament. Up next is the Fayetteville Regional and the long-awaited road to Omaha. This week on the podcast, we'll be joined by Joe Healy of Baseball America, who will give us a scoop on the teams coming to Fayetteville. Plus, Ben McLaughlin of the Nebraska Radio Network will join us to talk about the Cornhuskers' regional placement at Arkansas. Seth Campbell and I break down all things this week in Arkansas baseball. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Great therapists and estheticians go along with a new service that I am truly excited about. Rapid Tension Relief uses a special tool that will melt the tension and soreness away. Trust me, you will not be disappointed in the results. I highly recommend this feature along with a total body stretch assisted stretch program. Whether you are competing at a high level or just want to relax, these services are for everyone. Massage, rapid tension relief, total body stretch, deep muscle treatment massage, you choose. Or you can try any combination of those. So the next time you're feeling tight, make sure to call my friends at Massage Envy.
This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the only podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Now, here's Matt Jones and Seth Campbell.
It's a busy week in Arkansas baseball. The Razorbacks won the Southeastern Conference Tournament last Sunday with a 7-2 victory over Tennessee in the championship game in Hoover. It was Arkansas's first SEC tournament win and the program's first conference tournament victory since 1985 when the Razorbacks won the Southwest Conference Tournament at George Cole Field in Fayetteville with a championship game win over Texas. We'll talk more about the SEC tournament a little bit later, but first we're going to focus on the NCAA Regional that will begin in Fayetteville on Friday. Arkansas will play NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, in the first game of the Regional. That game will be at 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. And then Friday night, Nebraska will play Northeastern in the other game in the Fayetteville Regional bracket. This is the only regional in the country that has 4 conference champions. Arkansas, the winner of the SEC regular season and tournament title. Nebraska won the Big Ten regular season title. The Big Ten did not have a conference championship, a conference tournament this year. And so Nebraska got the league's automatic bid by virtue of winning the Big Ten regular season. Northeastern was the conference champion in the Colonial Athletic Association. Northeastern had to walk off UNC Wilmington in the 10th inning of the championship game in order to win that conference. And then the New Jersey Institute of Technology won the America East this year in their first year in the league. They didn't play in a championship game. They were going to play Stony Brook in the championship, but that game got rained out. And so NJIT players found out that they were the conference champions while they were waiting around in the parking lot. But for all the success of the teams that are coming into Fayetteville this week, Arkansas is a heavy favorite to win its regional. But we wanted to get more information on the other teams. And so we reached out to a good friend of the program, Joe Healy of Baseball America. Joe, for my money, knows the smaller conferences in college baseball better than anyone else out there. And so he's going to be able to give us a good preview of NJIT, Northeastern, also Nebraska from the Big Ten. And Joe joins us now. Joe, we appreciate you taking time for us.
Absolutely, Matt. Happy to do it. Best time of year. I'm excited to talk a little regional baseball.
You're always my go-to guy this time of year because you pay attention to some of the conferences that might fly under the radar. Let's start first with Arkansas's opponent on Friday, NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology. What do we know about this team?
Yeah, so, first off, with NJIT, we should say that it's just an incredible accomplishment for this program. It's a first-time thing for them. It's a program that was kind of miscast in previous years as being a member of the ASUN. I actually wrote about last offseason that they were moving to the America East, and it was just so much more of a natural fit for them from a scheduling standpoint, the types of players they recruit, the travel not being as bad. And, oh, by the way, they're not going to have to play Florida Gulf Coast and Stetson and Kennesaw State and those programs that are just historically better than they are. And they really responded in their first year this year. It's a team I would compare them. If you look at a team that Arkansas fans will remember, Central Connecticut State, that was in their regional a couple of years ago, I think CCSU might have a little bit of an edge there if we were to line those two teams up. And you'll remember that CCSU won a game in that regional. NJIT is going to have to work pretty hard to get that done. But, looking at individual players here, offensively, Julio Marcano is the one power bat in the lineup that you kind of have to game plan for a little bit. He actually plays in the team with his twin brother, David. They're from Houston. So it was quite a recruiting get to get those two guys to New Jersey. But the other guy offensively to look out for is Albert Choi. They're one of their outfielders, and their head coach, Robbie McClellan, told me before the season a couple of years ago that he was going to be a real dude. And he has absolutely turned out to be that. He'll hit with a little bit of power, but he's mostly an average guy, and he'll steal bases. He's 27 and 28 on the base paths. Pitching wise, it is a veteran pitching staff. And it should be said, this is a pretty veteran team in general. They're not going to blow anybody away, whether you're talking about Tyler Stafflinger or the closer Jake Rappaport. But that can be kind of tricky for a team like Arkansas, as you know, Matt, where they're used to seeing SEC velocity every weekend. And outside of some midweek games where they're playing some lesser competition, they're not really used to seeing guys up there flinging 83-mile-an-hour fastballs. So while I can't imagine NJIT coming out there and shutting the team down, it is one of those deals where if you're a fan, you may need to adjust your expectations, because it might take an inning or two for Arkansas to kind of lock in against that type of pitcher, because it's just not what they see week to week. It's not going to be a team full of guys trying to get them out with velocity, that's for sure.
And then on the other side, you've got Nebraska against Northeastern. Kind of a fascinating matchup to me from the standpoint that, Nebraska hasn't played anybody outside the Big Ten this year. And then as you look at Northeastern, this seems like a team that can really pitch.
Absolutely, yeah. There was a lot of focus, and I get it. There was a lot of focus on how this was a tough regional for Arkansas because Nebraska got put in it. And I agree, by the way, having a Big Ten champ go to the number one overall seed is kind of strange. That seems like a little gift to Arkansas there. I mean, that seems like a something they would want to avoid. But I think it's almost worse that Northeastern is the 3 here, because I don't mean to disparage Nebraska, but I think Northeastern could have easily been a 2. Now, it's important to put context on this discussion, because the CAA, the Colonial, where Northeastern plays, for scheduling reasons this year, they split the conference into 2 divisions. And so Northeastern got put in a division with Towson, with Hofstra, with Delaware. Those might be the 3 worst teams in the CAA. So they were really getting fat on the worst teams in that conference. However, they were absolutely dominating it. They slipped up a couple times late in the year when they'd kind of already sewn up everything they needed to sew up. But for the most part, they really just ran roughshod over it. I saw this team against Wake Forest earlier in the year. And what I will tell you is that typically you expect against teams in mid-major leagues and below, if you were to line the teams up with just blank jerseys on, and you were to line up Arkansas and then line up the opposing mid-major team, and then you were to look at them, you could pick out which team was Arkansas and which team is the mid-major team just by looking at them. I think you could still do that with Arkansas and Northeastern if you go 35 to 35. But if you line up the top 15 guys on each team, you might not be able to tell the difference. This is a Northeastern team that's physical, they're mature, they're strong. They do have velo on the mound. Sebastian Keen's a guy who could pitch in the SEC. Cam Schlittler's a guy who could pitch in the SEC. They've got a good innings eater in Wyatt Murphy, a good closer, a good swingman in Wyatt Scotty. Like, they've got legit arms on this team that could pitch in the SEC. Now, would they be the best guys in the SEC? No, but they could get outs in the SEC. And then offensively, the one name you need to know is Jared Dupree. 21 home runs on the year. Obviously, that's going to get it done. And he's a physical specimen. He's 6 foot, 200, built solid, really looks the part. And they've got a team of guys who just really handle the bat well. And oh, by the way, this will be a good test for, Casey Opitz. We know so much about his defensive acumen, but they stole 119 bases this year. So if we get a matchup between Arkansas and Northeastern at any point over the weekend, I think that's going to be a key matchup, because when Northeastern's offense is really moving, it's when they're swiping some bases in addition to hitting home runs.
Yeah, NJIT also, I think they're 61 of 68 on stolen bases this year. A couple of teams that have been pretty good in that department. I wonder, Joe, is Northeastern a team like Fairfield in that if they had not have won their conference tournament, would they have been an at-large bid? Because they really had to fight through their tournament to get that automatic bid, had to come through the loser's bracket, and then won the championship game on a walk-off home run.
Yeah, I think the commonality between those two teams, and I think one of them is real and one of them is manufactured, and that's that this selection committee, for better or worse, leaned on RPI again in a year when RPI means less than it ever has. And that's not necessarily criticism, that's just an observation. Fairfield was 3 in the RPI, and that means nothing because they played, you talked about the Big Ten playing conference-only games. Well, so did the Metro Atlantic where Fairfield plays. And yet they got in as an at-large team. Now, I will admit it's just a good story. Fairfield, I mean, 37-3. So like, why the heck not put them in the field? Let's see what happens, right? Northeastern's a little different though. They were 30 in the RPI, and that number is real. I mean, it's not the strongest resume. I'm not here to tell you that, but they did play some teams out of conference. They played well against teams out of conference. So that's a team I think, if Fairfield had played non-conference games, its RPI would not be 3. We wouldn't even be talking about it here probably. Northeastern, though, that was a pretty real schedule, and they handled themselves okay. So I get the sense that Northeastern is probably in either way. Whereas Fairfield, I think, had they played a normal schedule, we're not having this discussion. So that's a little bit of a difference there. Now, we can argue as to whether Northeastern's resume is, the quality is good enough or not. But I think given this selection committee and what they valued, I think Northeastern probably was in either way.
Yeah, not looking at the schedule here, but I believe they beat Old Dominion 1 of 3. And you said you saw them against Wake Forest. I think they won 1 of 3 that weekend too.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule really broke right for them. Obviously, it wasn't a great year for Wake Forest, but still a top 100 RPI team. But Old Dominion being a top 10 RPI team is doing a lot of heavy lifting for them. And then, they had some other decent games. Boston College is on the schedule. They had UConn on the schedule, and that game didn't get played. But so they really did try. And that's one thing that this program does a pretty good job of. I mean, you may remember they got in 2018 as an at-large team with a pretty similar resume, like a gaudy record, really good record in conference. Their out of conference stuff didn't blow you away, but it was a decent number of wins against okay but not great RPI teams. And there was actually a lot of consternation about them being in that year, because that was also the year Kentucky missed out, that really talented Kentucky team that was coming off of a super regional, and they went 13-17 in the SEC, I think, and then didn't get in. And that was kind of the debate, was Northeastern versus Kentucky. And I'm of the mind, and maybe this is just my own personal viewpoint on it, like I feel like let's give a shot to some of these teams in these conferences that really dominated the league, versus kind of a milquetoast SEC or ACC team that had plenty of opportunities and just frankly didn't take care of them. Like
in Alabama this year.
Right. Yeah. And I think Alabama is an interesting case because I think you can argue what they accomplished was impressive without Connor Prelip and Antoine Jean for basically the entire year. So that's a whole different thing. But yeah, just generally speaking, Alabama is a good example. LSU is a pretty good example, although they played better down the stretch. Yeah, but those types of teams, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not really crying foul too much over Pitt being left out in the ACC, because in those conferences, frankly, I struggle to have a lot of sympathy for teams that miss out in those leagues because you're given so much rope to try to figure it out.
Let's talk about Nebraska for a minute. That's a team that a lot of people are focusing on here in Fayetteville. Of course, the storyline is great with Dave Van Horn playing the team. He took from irrelevance and made him relevant in Nebraska 20 years ago. But then you've got Will Bolt coaching the Cornhuskers this year. First full season for Bolt at Nebraska. They played the Big Ten schedule, like we said. How good is the Big Ten this year? Because they got 3 teams into the tournament. What do we make of Nebraska's 31-12 record?
I think it's impressive. I think to my eyes, and right now, to your point, all we have is the kind of the eye test and what I hear from other people who know the Big Ten, because we didn't get that, cross-conference competition. I think it was a good but not great year in the Big Ten. I think 3 is about right. Had they played non-conference games and had a conference tournament, I think they could have got 4. But this is not one of those years when the Big Ten was probably going to get 5. I don't think it was that good a year in the Big Ten. So I think that record for Nebraska is not fraudulent anyway. I think it was a solid year in the Big Ten. And, by the way, Nebraska was kind of the Arkansas of the Big Ten in this way. Arkansas, the thing you can say most about them is that they really just had no let up the entire year. It was so consistent weekend after weekend. Things did not always go right for that team, and they always figured it out. Nebraska is kind of the same way. They had one slip up against Rutgers at home, and they looked pretty bad in that series. They gave 2 games away they probably should have won and got swept. But outside of that, they were incredibly consistent from wire to wire. And so they are pretty similar teams in that way. And you mentioned Dave Van Horn. And, in some ways, Teddy, my colleague, and I talk about the ghost of Dave Van Horn around Nebraska because, fair or not, every coach in Nebraska baseball history is now going to be compared to him because there's an expectation of what Nebraska can accomplish. And there's a debate to be had about whether or not that's even possible now that they're in the Big Ten versus the Big 12. That's a discussion for another day, but he does still loom over that program in a big way. And this is really the first team they've had in a while that feels they've won other Big Ten titles, but this one feels a little bit different in terms of they were clearly the best team in the Big Ten this year, clearly the most consistent. And it's a team that, offensively, they don't have a bopper in the middle of the order, but the lineup has good depth. Jackson Hallmark having a breakout year was huge for them. He's the guy that really kind of makes their offense go. But Max Anderson's having a nice year. Luke Roscom, Spencer Schwellenbach. I think on the mound, the most important pitcher they have is Cade Povich in terms of what he gave them. Because if you take Cade Povich, their staff ace, now, Arkansas is probably not going to face him because I imagine they're going to have to use him against Northeastern.
Mm-hmm.
But you take him out of the equation, and I don't really know what you're looking at with this Arkansas starting rotation. The fact that he was able to come in and be the type of Friday guy they needed, I think really raised the ceiling for what they were capable of this year. And we obviously see how that ended up working out. I will say they are a tough 2 seed for Arkansas. I'm not going to argue with that. However, what I will say is that their pitching staff, I think, is not a great matchup from their standpoint against the Arkansas offense. They don't really miss bats. Cade Povich is a low 90s guy. Chance Roach is a high 80s, low 90s guy, a pitch to contact right-hander. He's their second best starter. They've got some velo in the bullpen with Schwellenbach, but because he's a two-way player, they can't just run him out there. They can't use him like Kevin Kopps, right? Because he's also playing shortstop. Another reliever, Jake Buns, has some velo and can strike some guys out. But for the most part, it's kind of a pitch to contact pitching staff. And so those types of pitching staffs do well against teams that are either A, over aggressive, or B, you're not going to get burned by power. You're not afraid to give up a 3-run home run. And neither of those things describe Arkansas's offense. So I actually think it's a pretty good matchup for Arkansas from that standpoint, because I think you can get to this pitching staff.
I wanted to ask you a couple of big picture questions before I let you go, Joe. One, you guys spend so much time trying to project these regional fields. And it seems to me, and maybe I'm looking at this just from an Arkansas perspective, and so forgive me if I am, but it doesn't seem like these fields are as regional as they used to be. I mean, I look at Arkansas's field. They've got New Jersey Tech coming in from, 1,300 miles. Northeastern is from Boston. That's even further away. When they hosted a regional here 2 years ago, California was sent here. Central Connecticut State was sent here, like you noted earlier. It just doesn't seem to me like these are fields that you could even come close to projecting because they don't really have a regional feel to them anymore.
Yeah, there's always one or two. Like, some are easier than others, right? And like the ones in Florida are typically pretty easy because the teams. Florida hosts and Miami doesn't. Well, there you go. Where Miami's going. The ones in Southern California some years, now there isn't a Southern California host this year, but that typically is fairly easy. Even the ones in the Midwest are fairly easy because you have to like cluster the Midwest teams together. But outside of Notre Dame,
like what they did at Notre Dame, yeah.
Right. Outside of Notre Dame, we just didn't have a lot of those, team places to send those types of teams. So I think Arkansas ends up getting that treatment a little bit because it's like, ends up being, it's better than sending the West Coast teams all the way to the East Coast. And it's better than sending the East Coast teams all the way to the West Coast. And the Texas teams are typically all clustered in regionals in either Fort Worth or Austin or College Station or whatever it is in that given year. So I think that's the part of the reason why Arkansas ends up that way a little bit, is it's right in the middle of the country. It's not like it's right next door necessarily to a bunch of mid-major teams that need places to go. A lot of teams are going to have to fly to get there anyway. So I think that I agree with your general sentiment. The regionals are less regional than they used to be, but I do think there is something to the fact that Arkansas is a specific place where you tend to get teams from further away because there's not a lot of natural geographic teams to send there unless like Missouri State is in the mix or something like that. Yeah,
like 2017, they had ORU, Missouri State, and Oklahoma State. That was a true regional.
Right. Yeah,
I haven't seen that quite as much the last few years. I wanted to ask you, too, here coming up next week, you're going to have the Dick Hauser Trophy is going to name its semifinalists. I believe the Golden Spikes is going to do the same. Obviously, Kevin Kopps has had a great year for the Razorbacks. He's going to be in that discussion. I think we can all agree on that. Who are some of the other candidates, though, this year who you think fit into National Player of the Year discussion?
It's a good question because we've been kind of spoiled in college baseball, the last few years because we've had these big players that you came into the year going, oh, that's the guy, right? So it's
like an Adley Rutschman. Yeah.
Adley Rutschman, Spencer Torkelson. Like, even if you really liked Andrew Vaughn, it's like, okay, Andrew Vaughn is in that mix. And this year we had some of those guys come into the year and they've kind of fallen flat a little bit, where you talk about a guy like Matt McLean at UCLA who's having a nice year but not a breakout year. Adrian Del Castillo at Miami, a nice year but not a breakout year. Judd Fabian, who hitting home runs, but ton of strikeouts, not hitting for average. I think one guy that has really stood out to me this year is Henry Davis at Louisville. He's having an incredible year that isn't quite on the same level, but I would say is at least in the neighborhood of what Buster Posey did at Florida State. Buster Posey was absurd. He hit like 463 at Florida State, which is Henry Davis is not quite in that territory, but is kind of in that neighborhood at least. And so he's the guy I think I'm looking at because it's also catcher, and I think that gets a little bit of a nod there as well. And there's a scouting element too, and I know it doesn't necessarily matter for the awards, but he's on our radar big time because he's a guy that, the draft people, and I don't cover the draft explicitly, but the people who cover the draft for us say that he's a guy who's helped himself as much as just about anybody in the country in terms of the way he's thought of. So it has been a little more of a wide open year than we've had in a while. He's the guy I think that stands out most to me, but certainly I wouldn't be surprised by a number of other guys. And I would say that anybody who's not considering Kevin Kopps is in the wrong because, the reliever label is something that's hard to overcome. But if you look at his numbers, if I did not know he was a starter or reliever and you showed me his numbers, like I would just think like, wow, this is a really good starting pitcher, So I think it's short-sighted to just put him as a quote unquote, just a reliever because he's, as you know, he's so much more than that. He brings so much more to the table for Arkansas. And in a year when it is a little more wide open and we're not dealing with, okay, this is obviously the best player in college baseball, this award needs to go this direction. I think it's the type of year where we could see him get more consideration for something like that than he would in any other year.
A relief pitcher hasn't won the Golden Spike since 1993.
Yeah, well, and that's and I would actually, I'm surprised it was even that recent, to be honest with you, just because that bias is so strong. But like I said, we need to free ourselves. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here and to your listeners as well, but we need to free ourselves from just looking at him that way because it's not, he's not a reliever, I don't know what you call him, but he's not a reliever. It's this new class of pitcher that Kevin Kopps has just created that has a population of one, and it's him. And I've not seen anything like it. I've tried to rack my brain thinking of relievers that stand out that were similar in that way. And there are some comps I've had thrown around at me, like Houston Street for Texas back in the day. But what Kopps is doing is even different than that. It's just an incredible season and unlike anything I've ever seen.
On the ESPN broadcast the other day of the SEC championship game, they called him a unicorn when he was he was warming up, I think, in the fourth inning, and they said, "There's Arkansas's closer warming up in the fourth inning." Like you said, it's just amazing what we're seeing from him this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, when you consider that he's not up there, the stuff is good, but it's not good in the way if you told someone, hey, this kid's stuff is good and they expect to throw, to see a kid throw in 98, it's the combination of his story, going through the ups and downs he has, and the fact that he's not pumping 98 with the big yacker of a curveball, the fact that it's that cutter slider pitch that he just throws like ad nauseum over and over and over again. Just all of those things mixed into one make it just it's been such a fun story. Honestly, one of the things that's brought me the most joy this year.
Well, Joe, we appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you in Omaha in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate it, Joe. Joe Healy of Baseball America. When we come back, Seth Campbell will join me. This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today. Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy. Welcome back to the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy.
If there was any doubt that Arkansas was the best team in the SEC, they put it to bed last week when they won the SEC tournament in Hoover. And it wasn't just that they won the tournament, it's that they looked really good in doing so. Nearly threw a perfect game against Georgia. Lyle Lockhart was 1 out away from doing that. They beat Vanderbilt on Thursday night 6-4, and I thought that game was not as close as the final score indicated. Vanderbilt scored a couple of runs in the first inning, kind of, you won't say they were gifted runs, but Arkansas lost a fly ball in the lights that would have gotten them out of the first inning scoreless, and as it was, Vandy ended up scoring a couple of runs, beat Ole Miss in a really good game in the semifinals, and then beat Tennessee rather soundly in the championship game to win it. I still don't like the SEC tournament. I still think it's a gigantic waste of time. I'd rather see another SEC weekend series or maybe another non-conference weekend series for the teams. But the tournament's not going away. And, I think the thought from Arkansas last week is if you're going to go to Hoover, you might as well win it. And I thought that was you could really see that on the weekend. I think that teams, if you get eliminated during the double elimination bracket, say on Thursday or Friday, I don't know that it affects you so much, but it seems like teams, once they get to Saturday and Sunday, they've really gotten invested into the tournament, and it hurts them when they don't win. You saw that with Florida against Tennessee. You saw that with Tennessee against Arkansas. And that was a Tennessee home game, by the way, just about on the championship Sunday. There were obviously hundreds of Arkansas fans there, but of the 10,500 who were in the stands, you have to believe that maybe 5,000, 6,000 to 7,000 were in Tennessee orange. And, Arkansas, they're no stranger to playing in front of large crowds this year. I saw something the other day that they played in front of 10 of the 21 largest crowds in the country this season. And they did what they did. They beat a good team in front of, either a hostile road environment or a neutral environment where there were a lot of fans from the other teams there. And it was a great showing for them. And I thought, Seth, it really did two things. It put a punctuation on their SEC championship season. There's no doubt that they are the best team in the conference. Didn't think there was a whole lot of doubt anyway, but now, nobody can say that they're better than Arkansas because Arkansas's got both trophies outright. And the other thing I thought it did was, it just gave them a lot of momentum going into the regional. Sometimes teams will expend their pitching in Hoover to get to the championship series. You saw Vanderbilt do that in 2007. You saw Ole Miss do that in 2018. It did not feel like Arkansas really, exhausted its pitching staff. You still got to feel really good about their pitching going into the regional. And I think that's different from the last time that Arkansas got to the championship in Hoover in 2017. They really had to use a lot of pitching to get to that point. I think they played 5 games in 5 days in Hoover that year. And by the time they got to the regional, I thought their arms were really tired. And I don't think that's the case this year.
No, what you mentioned, I think, is spot on too, Matt, about you don't like the SEC tournament. And I don't either. But if you can treat it like another weekend, and the top 4 teams really can, if you don't lose in the tournament until you get to the single elimination rounds, then you can not get behind on pitching. So you can have your starter throw, and even Arkansas threw Lyle Lockhart because they didn't want to throw Wicklander early. So you can have a guy like that come in, and then really you were looking at your Friday, Saturday, Sunday guys throwing basically on time. I think Wicklander threw on Thursday, which he had thrown on Thursday the week before, and then they got Friday off and then got to throw Saturday and Sunday. So I don't think that, like you said, Matt, I don't think that their pitching is in question, is been overused, been taxed too much. They're deep anyway. The thing that you just are sick about at the SEC tournament is the fact of that you got Zebulon Vermillion goes out. Now, he is probably going to be okay. They seem to think that was a forearm cramp. Nothing's too official on that yet. But then the Brady Slavens going down with an injury. And even if Slavens comes back, I'm not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, Matt, but those sprains, and when you turn your ankle like that, it's hard. It takes a long time for you to get back to 100%. Now, you may be able to come back and play, but those things kind of tend to linger. And so that's kind of the things that you, as watching this team that you don't like about the SEC tournament for basically something that, quote unquote, doesn't matter. But to this team, it seemed like they wanted to go out and win that tournament championship, something that had never been done at Arkansas, and they wanted to do it. And you could tell that it, like you said, it meant something to them.
You could have those injuries.
And you could.
In any weekend, doesn't matter who you're playing. And with Vermillion, I think that he had been experiencing the cramps in his bicep even before last week, and you wonder if maybe that contributes some to some of his struggles that he's been having throughout the season. I think they had to sit him down at one point for a couple of weeks because of some arm soreness. I don't know if this is the same thing that he was dealing with earlier in the season or not. I will say the thing that I thought was really good for the Razorbacks in Hoover was the fact that they were able to play 4 games and they were able to get 4 different starting pitchers out there. And it's become apparent that as you go through the postseason, you're going to see a starting rotation. And I say starting rotation of 4 players just because you never know what you're going to face. I mean, you get into a regional, you might have to play 5 games. You go to Omaha and you get in the losers bracket after the first day. You may have to play 5 games to get yourself out of there and get to the championship series. So I think the 4-man rotation right now, it's pretty clear, is Wicklander, and then some combination of Bolden, Lyle Lockhart, Jackson Wiggins, based on matchup. And they were able to get Lockhart a really nice start against Georgia. I think he's pitching as well as he has all year. They were able to get Wiggins a pretty nice start against Tennessee. They stretched him out to about 62 pitches. I think 60, 65 is what they were wanting to throw him on Sunday against Tennessee. And then Bolden, he kind of gives you what he gives you, which is typically about 4 innings. And that seems like that's the type of start. And I was talking with Matt Hobbs about this week, and there's been so much made this year of the lack of a second starter. But if you look at it just in terms of innings pitched on a weekend, more often than not, especially over the back half of the SEC season, they were getting 6-7 innings a weekend from Patrick Wicklander. They were getting 5, 6, 7 innings a weekend from Kevin Kopps. And if you look at it that way, then all of a sudden you're getting starter innings from 2 different pitchers. You're just using them differently. And, and Matt made a great point that, baseball fans kind of want to see what's normal to them. And seeing a pitching staff pitch from the back to the front, so to speak, that's foreign to them. That's something that teams aren't really used to, or fans aren't really used to seeing. But you look across Major League Baseball with the way that, pitching is changing. What was normal in a normal pitching weekend 10 years ago, that may not be normal 10 years from now. And so we're kind of in this transformation age, if you will, and they're getting good innings. They got Connor Nolan for 3 really strong innings at against Ole Miss. He has pitched so well since the LSU outing, and in talking to Matt this week, he said he chalks up the LSU outing to it being his first time back. Wasn't that Connor was really throwing poorly, but he was throwing strikes. He was still kind of building up his velocity, still kind of building up his pitch count. And LSU was down by 13 runs when he came into the game, and they were just free swinging. Hit a couple of home runs against him. Matt Hobbs called it the perfect storm that happened to him in Baton Rouge. I think you've got to feel really good about this pitching staff and where they are, because you look at going into the regional, Arkansas has won 8 games in a row. And over those 8 games, they have a 2.38 ERA. They have not allowed more than 4 runs in any game, and that was against Vanderbilt. And we talked about how 2 of those runs were kind of fluke runs. And 7 of the 8 teams that they played are in the NCAA postseason. The only team that they played during that time that's not in the tournament is Georgia, who most people think was one of the first 2 or 3 teams left out. And so this has been really good competition they played, and they're pitching as well as they've pitched all year. And it just kind of seems like we're following the old Dave Van Horn script, right? Where you've got all these questions about a team, And then somewhere early May, mid-May, things just start to kind of fall together, and they start playing really well once they get into the postseason. Doesn't mean they're going to go to Omaha. They could have a slip-up, but they're playing really well right now. I think that they have played as well over the last 3 or 4 weeks as they played at any stretch during the season.
I don't watch every baseball game. I think that would be not something that a lot of people do, but just from keeping up with college baseball, Matt, I think that it is apparent that Arkansas is the best team in college baseball right now. And I caution because the best team in college baseball doesn't always win the national championship. And as you can tell, since 1999, the 1 seed has never won the college champion or the national championship in college baseball.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk about that in just a second.
Okay. So going through this stretch, it's just been crazy to me to say that you're following this team and, from just being, I guess, in the weeds with this team of following them every single day, reporting on them every single day, that you don't take like the bigger picture and look back and you have guys out there that are national college baseball reporters that are sitting there and going, hey, this is kind of a situation of, taking Arkansas versus the field. Like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean just because Arkansas is the best team that they will win the national championship, but being so close to this team, you can see its flaws, but when you back away, you just almost don't understand for a second how dominant the Arkansas Razorbacks have been this year. And it's almost wild to run through the SEC, not lose a series, to win the SEC tournament, to go to Arlington at the beginning of the year and just start off the year hot and then not fade anytime during the season. All these things combined have made this team good. And the thing that almost everybody questions is the pitching depth. And like you said, Matt, all of a sudden, all of that is coming around. You've got a guy in the bullpen now that you feel pretty confident in, Connor Noland. You've got guys in Bolden and Wiggins and obviously Wicklander. And then, you can throw Monk out there. You can throw other guys out there. And obviously you have Kevin Kopp. So there's weapons in this staff. And I think that you were right when you said that this is just a different team. This is just a different way of pitching that baseball fans really aren't used to. They're pulling almost the Tampa Bay Rays opener out with having Caleb Bolden throw 3 or 4, which is good. Connor Noland, Lyle Lockhart, like just all these guys combining. And why would you limit where you could get 80% effort off of Lyle Lockhart in inning number 6, or you could go to somebody that can give you 2 to 3 solid innings and can give you 2 or 3 solid innings. So it's been interesting, but I think this is Arkansas. I really think this all started with the pandemic, Matt, and a lot of people coming back and Arkansas having a bigger roster. You just had more talent on the roster. And so Dave and the pitching staff just decided to get guys in the game and see what could happen. And they realized that, hey, we have a decent amount of guys on this team that can pitch and pitch well.
Before the season, we said we thought that the pitching staff was going to be the depth of the pitching was going to be the strength of the team. And I don't know if it's the strength of the team right now, but I do think that it's showing up right now when you have, possibly a couple of guys that have got over 100 innings combined out, and you feel as good about your pitching as you have all season. I wanted to go back to what you said about the number 1 overall seed. Of course, Arkansas is the top seed in the NCAA tournament. That was about the most predictable thing that could have come out of the selection show on Memorial Day. I looked up, Seth, all of the number 1 seeds and how they did in the NCAA tournament. Since 1999, of course, that's when the tournament went to its current format. When you have regionals and super regionals, it was different before then. In 99, Miami won the national championship as the number 1 overall seed. That's the only team that's ever done it. But when you look at the other number 1 seeds, a trend kind of emerges, I think, in that the 1 seed comes from conferences that are not as strong. Okay? I can't imagine any of these 1 seeds played a schedule that was as difficult as what Arkansas did this year. What were they? They were 20-4 against regional hosts. I think they were 28-6 against teams that made the tournament. These are the 1 seeds, by the way. Just some of them. Really, over the last 15 years, the 1 seed, with the exception of Florida, who's been the number 1 seed 3 times, has not come from the SEC. It's come from either the ACC or the Pac-10, Pac-12. So you're looking at, in 19, UCLA. I think we all know what kind of schedule UCLA plays. They have some success when they get to the postseason, but I feel like the success in the postseason doesn't really match their seeding coming into the postseason a lot of times. They won the national championship in 2013. I think they've been to 3 College World Series under John Savage. But they've been a national seed a top 8 national seed a number of times. You had Florida in 18. They lost to Arkansas and Omaha in the semifinals. Oregon State in 17. That was a team that was like 53-4 or something going to the World Series, and they lost to LSU. Of course, they had the big story break about their pitcher before the tournament. They didn't throw him, and everybody remembers that. We won't go into that. But it's basically a lot of Florida, a lot of UCLA, some Oregon State a couple of times, North Carolina, Virginia in 2011, Arizona State in 2010. That was the Arizona State team that beat Arkansas in the Supers. There hasn't been a number 1 seed that's played for a national championship since Texas in 2009. Texas in 2009 lost to LSU. Also as the number 1 seed in 2004, Texas lost to Cal State Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton was a number 1 seed somewhere in here. And so, Tulane was a number 1 seed one year. So I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like sometimes, and I think it's gotten better over the last 10 years or so, but I think there's been a lot of times during that, 20, 21 years where a top seed hasn't won the championship. I think there have been a lot of times where you could probably look at the field from a pretty objective viewpoint at the beginning of the postseason and say, I'm not quite sure that team, their record is good enough, and it says, that they're a great team, but I don't know that they're really the best team in the field. And so, the SEC hasn't had a whole lot of chances to prove itself as the number 1 overall seed, but in most of the cases where they've had the 1 seed, they've had a team that's gone really far into the tournament. Florida went to the World Series in 18. Florida went to the World Series in 16. Florida went to the World Series in 2012. Really, the one SEC team that has flamed out was Vanderbilt in 2007, and we mentioned them a little bit earlier. That was the David Price team, where they, I think, used David Price in the championship game in Hoover, tried to turn him around in like 5 days, lost to Michigan, and ended up losing their home regional to Michigan in 2007. Really kind of the cautionary tale of, what not to do at the World Series. And, so for the most part, I know that stat is out there, that the 1 seed hasn't done so well, but I think you have to kind of look at it a little bit deeper and look at who the 1 seeds have been and say that, there hasn't really been a lot of 1 seeds like Arkansas this year.
I think that's fair. I don't think that there's a team in college baseball this year, especially that's been tested like the Arkansas Razorbacks have. The only, I don't know if it's a cautionary tale, the only thing that you maybe worry about if you are a Razorback fan is that they have just had so much success that, they almost get the big head syndrome. But I don't know. I'm not in the dugout or anything like that, but I just don't know that I can see Dave Van Horn allowing his team to do that either. I
don't think that's going to be the case. I think the thing to watch out for is that they've beaten everybody else who's supposed to win this tournament. And so they were already going to be the hunted team, but now you've got Texas Tech who lost to them, and you had the chirping at the end of the game. You had Texas lost to them, TCU lost to them, Vanderbilt lost to them, Mississippi State got swept at home by them. I mean, these are the teams that are supposed to challenge Arkansas for the national championship this year, and they've lost to them. So in addition to, trying to take the scalp of the number 1 team, you also have a lot of teams that are out for revenge, I think.
One last thing here, Matt. Do you worry about those teams that Arkansas has played? The TCUs, the Texas Techs, and the Texas of the world. Arkansas played them so early that neither of those 2 teams, Arkansas or their opponent, will be the same team, especially because Arkansas wasn't set with Kevin Kopps at the back end of stuff. But are you worried? Tennessee, this past weekend, that was the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings that they had saw Kevin Kopps, and they put some balls in play against him.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that was Kopps' second appearance of the weekend, and he is always worse on his second appearance than his first. But is there a worry from you, if you're the Arkansas Razorbacks, that, hey, these teams that keep on seeing Kopps, if we have to see them again in the tournament, that there might be an advantage to that?
Maybe, but on the flip side, Arkansas has seen Sean Hunley a couple times, 3 times. They've seen Chad Dallas. They've seen Blade Tidwell. So I think that works both ways. And Tennessee put some balls in play against Kevin, too, up in Knoxville. Remember, they scored the run against him that broke that 28-inning scoreless streak that he had going. So I don't know. You mentioned the Arlington games. Patrick Wicklander didn't pitch in Arlington. Connor Nolan didn't pitch in Arlington. So it's a different looking team than, in a lot of different respects than what they saw in Arlington. Kevin Kopps wasn't pitching like this when he was in Arlington. He didn't get rocked by Texas Tech, but he didn't pitch great whenever he pitched against Texas Tech in that opener. In fact, I remember having the thought after that Texas Tech game, it's like, man, is Kopps ever going to, kind of break out and, become the dominant pitcher that I think he could. Now, I didn't think he would ever do what he's done this year. But there's been so much talk within the team about that cutter and how, the pitchers envy it and the hitters hate facing it. It's like, when are we going to see this, manifest itself, I guess, in a game? And we didn't see that in Arlington when they played Tech. But boy, have we seen it since then. By the way, Kevin Kopps, National Player of the Year by Collegiate Baseball newspaper. The Collegiate Baseball, that's the oldest baseball publication in the country, by the way, since 1957.
Oh.
They've been covering college baseball from Tucson, Arizona. But Kevin was the National Player of the Year there, and that has a lot of times been kind of a precursor, been a pretty good predictor of who wins either the Dick Howser or the Golden Spikes. There have been some years where the Golden Spikes and the Dick Howser Award, they were given to different players, but you look through the collegiate baseball's history, and a lot of times the National Player of the Year ended up winning one or both of those major Player of the Year awards, including Andrew Benintendi, by the way, in 2015. He won the Collegiate Baseball National Player of the Year. So I've been on this horse for 4 or 5 weeks now. I think Kevin is the National Player of the Year. He got my vote in the Dick Howser Trophy Award, vote. We'll see what happens. But we asked Joe Healy about this a little bit earlier. Who else is there that's going to challenge him for this? There's Henry Davis at Louisville. You might be able to make a case for a few others, like a Kumar Rocker at Vanderbilt, but it seems to me like there's just not a clear-cut winner. Let me go back. I think Kopps is the clear-cut winner. It seems to me like there's not another clear-cut favorite candidate for those National Player of the Year awards this year. And we'll see what happens. I think both of those have their semifinalists coming out next week, the Howser Trophy and the Golden Spikes.
That's what I was going to ask, is when can we expect to see some updates on that? So, all right, next week, we'll keep our eyes open.
Yeah, I think June 8th is when the Golden Spikes semifinalists come out, and I think it's sometime, in that same time frame that the Howser finalists are going to be announced. Not the semifinalists for the Howser Award or for the Howser Trophy have already been announced. There were 42 of them, and Kopps and Christian Franklin and Brady Slavens were all in that list. But I believe the Howser finalists come out next week, and then the Howser Award will be given during the College World Series the weekend after. I think it's always the first weekend of the College World Series when they give that award out. So we should be getting, some news about, Kopps' candidacy, if you will, coming out pretty soon. When we come back, we are going to take a look at the week ahead. We've already talked to Joe Healy about Northeastern and Nebraska, and in NJIT, we're going to take a little bit closer look at Nebraska. That and more when we come back on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Welcome back to the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Let's take a look at the week ahead, presented by Grease Pig.
The Fayetteville Regional begins Friday at 2 o'clock. Arkansas will play NJIT in the first game at Baum-Walker Stadium. 7 o'clock is the game time for Game 2 between Nebraska and Northeastern. And then here's how the Regional is going to work the rest of the weekend. The losers on Friday will play Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. All of this is, of course, weather permitting. 2 o'clock elimination game Saturday afternoon. Saturday night will be the winner's bracket game between the two winners of Friday's game. And then Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock will be another elimination game between the winner of the first game Saturday and the loser of the second game Saturday. And then Sunday night at 8 o'clock will be the first game, possibly the only game, of the regional championship. If the team that's in the driver's seat wins Sunday night, they will advance to the Super Regionals. If the team coming out of the loser's bracket wins Sunday night, then they'll force a winner-take-all game that will be played Monday. The initial schedule says that it'll be Monday at 6 p.m., although that is subject to change based on TV. Arkansas and NJIT, as I said, is going to be Friday at 2 o'clock. Dave Van Horn says that he wants to play the early game because it gives you more of an opportunity to, just kind of work around anything that might work against you, weather, things of that nature. This is the third straight year that Arkansas will play the early game in its home regional. Worked out well for them in 2018 and 2019. In 18, they beat ORU in Game 1, and then they beat, 2 years ago, they beat Central Connecticut State in Game 1. Week Ahead is brought to you by the Grease Pig. For 20 years, they have specialized in serving UA students, faculty, and staff. With 2 locations in Fayetteville on College Avenue and MLK Boulevard, the Grease Pig has experience for all your repair needs and, of course, complete service oil changes staffed with ASE-certified master technicians. They also provide tires and alignment services at their location on College Avenue. The Grease Pig, it's all about taking care of you, and they are a proud sponsor of the Week Ahead. I know that the people from the Grease Pig will be out at Baum-Walker Stadium this weekend. There are going to be a lot of people there. Tickets are sold out for all but student tickets on games Saturday and Sunday. Those will go on sale early those mornings. Very limited number of student tickets available, but otherwise all reserved and general admission tickets have been sold for the regional. There's a lot of excitement around Fayetteville for this regional. It's not as much of a regional feel. We mentioned that earlier with Joe Healy of Baseball America. You've got a couple of teams coming in here from over 1,000 miles away. Nebraska is a somewhat regional team, but still that's a little bit of a haul for Nebraska to get here. That's about a 6-hour drive down to Fayetteville from Lincoln. And so, of course, it'll be a predominant Arkansas crowd. That would be the case regardless of who came into Fayetteville. But it's just kind of an interesting feel as you go into the regional. Don't know that you'll have just a whole lot of visitors from the other teams. And if you do have visitors, I think it's going to be a case of you have a local player who is going to be getting a lot of his teammates' tickets and giving them to family who's able to come up. I did read where I think it's, was it NJIT, Seth? I think NJIT has a couple of twin brothers from Houston who are going to have over 100 family members or friends and family members at the game. So you get a few instances of that, but I can't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of people making the trip down from Boston or Newark.
No, you can't really imagine that. I did talk to you, speaking of people that are ready to go for the regional match. I did talk to some guys yesterday that were already in line at the Hog Pen. This was on Wednesday, already in line. And first question I asked him was, well, why are you in line on Wednesday? And straight-faced, one of the guys, his name's Steve, he looked at me and he goes, because it was raining yesterday. And so they're ready. They did also mention that, they have tickets to all of the games.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're looking for tickets to different games besides the ones the Razorbacks are playing, that there will be tickets available to those. Just the ones where the Razorbacks are in, probably not.
Yeah, those are easy to find, the games that don't involve Arkansas. Although I will say that you get a fair number of people who are just kind of curious, who've bought the tickets, they're in town, it's something to do on a Friday night, and they'll go out there and, they may not stay for the whole game, but they'll go out there and they'll watch 4, 5, 6 innings of it.
There's a lot of people in Arkansas that just love baseball, and they love to spend time out at Baum-Walker Stadium. And I've spent worse Friday afternoons, I'll tell you that much.
And this year, with the attendance limits up until 3 weeks ago, there have been a lot of people who haven't been able to get into the ballpark until maybe this weekend or for sure a couple of weeks ago when they played Florida. We're going to bring in now Ben McLaughlin. He calls Nebraska's baseball games on the Cornhusker Radio Network. Nebraska, as we said, is the number 2 seed in the Fayetteville Regional, and they'll face Northeastern on Friday night at 7 o'clock. Ben, we appreciate you taking some time for us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Exciting time.
So let's talk about Nebraska being here in Fayetteville. The sense I get from the just kind of the stories I've read from Nebraska media is that it's a placement that maybe people don't like as much, and I think there's probably there's something to that, being a Big Ten champion, being sent to the number 1 overall seed, another power conference champion. I wonder within the program though, what is the sense as they're getting ready to come to Fayetteville this week?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. There's definitely 2 different viewpoints, those of, us and the media, and then the team. The team all year has kind of embraced this, the unofficial team motto is don't care, all year, with the COVID protocols, with, only playing 14 home games, not being the only school in the Big Ten without a home pod. There are a lot of circumstances that were going against the team this year. And I think there's no better capper than the regional draw that we found out on Monday morning, going to the number 1 national seed. But, this team's all about controlling the controllables. Obviously, that's out of their hands. And the only thing they can do now is, go to Fayetteville and play the best baseball that they know how and see what happens. But, yeah, definitely a different perspective between the team and those that cover the team, because, us and as you said, the local media, not afraid to say how we feel about it, thinking that Nebraska had done plenty to avoid not just Arkansas, but maybe even the top 8 national seeds. But the committee didn't see it that way, and now we're en route to Fayetteville to take on the number 1 national seed in the tournament.
I wonder how interested you are to see how Nebraska plays against teams from out of conference, not just Arkansas if that matchup materializes, but really good team from Northeastern that you're going to play in the first game. Northeastern and NJIT, they played non-conference games. Nebraska wasn't able to. It was just kind of interesting because Nebraska initially was going to come to Fayetteville this year for a midweek game in March, and then obviously wasn't able to because the Big Ten said that you had to play, all conference games. How interested are you to see how they perform against non-conference competition after playing 43 games against the Big Ten?
Yeah, I'm really interested about it, and that was really a bummer. There was so much disappointment in our program and all the programs in the conference when Kevin Warren announced, the Big Ten commissioner, that this conference would play only games within the league. And as it manifested, it definitely hurt a team like Nebraska. It definitely hurt the RPIs of a team that got left out, like Indiana and Iowa. This could potentially have been a 5-bid league, but with no conference games and having the RPI essentially being a non-factor, it really handcuffed the league this year with only the 3 bids. So I'm really intrigued to see what the Huskers can do against non-conference opponents. I think everybody here would have loved to see, Nebraska play in-state rival Creighton, or go down to Fayetteville and, in the non-conference midweek and go play the Hogs, or, even the Dodgertown Classic out west, the preseason, the Huskers were going to go play in that against powers like UCLA. But unfortunately, that opportunity was taken from us. So, really, this is the only chance that they get. So, yeah, there is a lot of intrigue because we know so much about our conference teams already and how the Huskers would have stacked up. But, now that you're in a national tournament, you get to see teams from all over the country and, see how, they kind of fit together and, how the Huskers can compete against, in this case, Northeastern, Arkansas, and NJIT.
Every time that I've gone to Omaha, I've gone up there 5 times to cover the College World Series. It seems like Dave Van Horn is remembered very fondly for his days at Nebraska. What's your sense from within the fan base about how Dave Van Horn's remembered?
Dave Van Horn is a name that's carries a ton of weight in this state still, and there's a reason why so many locals, so many people from Omaha become Hogs fans when they're in the College World Series, is because of what he did for our program in the late 90s and the early 2000s until, he took off for Fayetteville. I mean, he turned this thing around. He took Nebraska from an average at best program to a program that could compete on the national level in a prestigious conference like the Big 12, and really put Nebraska baseball on the map. And Husker fans will never forget that. And the obvious ties now with our coach Will Bolt playing for Coach Van Horn starting in '99 and when he was a freshman, and helping Nebraska get to their first College World Series in school history in 2001. The Dave Van Horn's a name that people will covet around here forever because of that.
I heard somebody in Omaha a few years ago said that he's like Bob Devaney for Nebraska baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a stretch to say that now. DVH was only 20 years ago. Devaney was in the 60s, but I definitely think there's correlation there. I think Nebraska has been, really before that time, not taken too seriously around the national landscape. They, Coach Van Horn helped build it. Coach Anderson kind of took the torch and, what got Nebraska their first College World Series win in school history. Darren Erstad, a Nebraska guy through and through, got to Nebraska to a bunch of regionals and a conference championship in 2017. And now it's kind of fallen, in line to Will Bolt. And, in his first full season as skipper of the Huskers, won them a conference championship and, earned them a 2 seed in a regional. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But yeah, Van Horn laid that foundation.
Of course, part of that foundation, Haymarket Park, Hawks Field, which I think looks ironically quite similar to Baum Walker Stadium, where you'll be this weekend. But you mentioned Will Bolt, and I was talking with Van Horn about this week. Something I've heard throughout the years is that when Bolt was playing at Nebraska, his teammates called him Little DVH for his mannerisms, his demeanor. I guess they kind of looked alike, even kind of same stature. I mean, do you sense similarities between Bolt and Van Horn and how they coach?
100%. I mean, I think if you just look at the way that the teams are built between Arkansas and Nebraska, they're built, with the same principles. Now, obviously, Arkansas has a lot more talent on their roster than Nebraska does, but and what makes those teams good? You need quality pitching, you need to play really good defense, and you need offenses that are really versatile. And I think both teams possess that. And the whole gritty mentality, and I've heard multiple Arkansas players talk about being mentally tough, and not just this year, but every year. And that's exactly what Coach Bolt's trying to drive home to our guys, that the mentally tougher team wins the game more often than not. And so Will Bolt's whole entire goal is to get Nebraska to be the toughest mentally team in the country. And I think our players have adopted that thanks to some, big senior leaders and guys that, have helped Coach Bolt build this thing and lay that foundation for future Huskers. And that's part of the reason why they had such a successful year, is because they are a mentally tough team. And I know that's the reason why Arkansas was able to make it through the SEC regular season as champions and then go on that run that they did in Hoover and, win the SEC title in the tournament as well. Something that's only been done, I think, 3 other times in the tournament's history or the conference's history. You don't do that by accident. You have to be mentally tough to do that. And I would think those are probably the 2 biggest identities of these 2 teams.
Something that stands out to me as I look at Nebraska's schedule: beat Maryland 2 of 3 in Lincoln earlier this year, and then obviously beat Michigan last weekend in Lincoln 2 of 3. Was the Michigan series, is that as well as you've seen them play given the competition?
Well, the best we saw them play was actually the Indiana pod. And, I've been on a few Arkansas stations now, and the thing that I keep trying to drive home to people is how interesting this Big Ten race was with 2 weeks left of the regular season. We got ready to hop on a plane to head to Bloomington, Indiana, with 4 teams at the top of the race. It was us, it was Indiana, who was hosting their pod with Ohio State, and then it was also Maryland and Michigan. So those were the top 4 teams, and all 4 teams at the top played each other the last 2 weeks. It was essentially a round robin to win the conference championship. And so, the entire way up, we're going through all the scenarios and trying to figure out what magic numbers are and all that. nowhere did we expect Nebraska to go 4-0 in that regional against 3 high draft pick arms, 2 from Indiana, 1 from Ohio State, guys that'll be drafted in the top 3 rounds, and Nebraska to go 4-0. I mean, we just didn't expect that to happen. And the other thing you didn't expect to happen was Maryland to go on the road to Ray Fisher Stadium in Ann Arbor and beat Michigan 2 out of 3. So everything aligned perfectly. And instead of having the race coming down to literally the last day of the regular season, Nebraska clinched the Big Ten championship a week early, which nobody thought would happen. So that was just truly a magical weekend. And, you know, the team all week fought questions of, well, how are you going to stay motivated to play Michigan now that you've already had the league title? Well, they bounced back and won 2 out of 3 against a regional team, the Wolverines. So they're playing really good right now. They won 11 of their last 13 games. And, you know, they've been playing with a chip on their shoulder all year, and I don't see that changing.
As I've looked through the stats for Nebraska over the last few days, a couple of things stand out to me. Number one is that they seem like they field really well, 982 fielding percentage. I think that's top 10 nationally. And then it looks a lot like an SEC lineup from an average standpoint, in that what we saw throughout the SEC this year was that a lot of times there would be 2 really, really elite hot type hitters, and then there'd be maybe a pretty big drop off from, say, like a 350 average to something in the 270s, 280s, and that seems like that's what Nebraska has right now with Jackson Hallmark and Max Anderson. Could you tell me about those 2 players?
Yeah, Jackson is a Swiss Army knife. I mean, he does a lot of different things. He leads the conference in bunt hits. He's really fast. You know, the scouting report on him is he likes to bunt, so the third baseman usually plays in on him. He'll still bunt it sometimes, or he's also not afraid to use that hole that's left on the left side of the infield. And he's got sneaky pop. I think he has 7 home runs on the year. So, you know, you look at him and you don't say, okay, this guy's a big home run hitter, but he's versatile. He leads the team in stolen bases. I think he's 2nd or 3rd in the conference in stolen bases. He just does everything well. And he's one of the heartbeats of this team. And then Max Anderson, you know, his first at bat of the season was his first at bat in college, and on his first pitch he ever saw, hit a home run. And we're thought, okay, you know, this kid's going to be pretty good, and he's been super consistent ever since. Big Ten freshman of the year. I don't think he's hit below, his average has ever ducked below 300 all season long. He's just been really consistent. And as a freshman, that's not easy to do. But I think the biggest thing that this Nebraska offense has compared to all others is they're pretty balanced 1 through 9. A lot of times, you know, there's a steep drop off after the 4-hole or after the 5-hole. You're really relying on, you know, 1 or 2 guys to drive in runs. That hasn't been the case this year. You know, Nebraska's 2 hottest hitters entering this tournament are their 8 and 9-hole batters with Bryce Matthews, another freshman, and Griffin Everett. Both of those guys were hitting around 215 to 220 at the start of April, and now I think their averages are already up close to 300. So, you know, 2 really hot hitters at the bottom of the order have sparked a lot of rallies, and you know, the whole goal is to get guys on base for the top of the order and have those guys driving runs, and that's what's been happening.
I put Max Anderson on my freshman All-America ballot the other day. He's certainly got a reputation coming into this. Will Bolt, has he announced his pitching plans for this week? I would assume Cade Povich would throw for game 1.
Yeah, Cade Povich has been our ace all year. He is going to throw against Northeastern. Their statistics are no joke. I mean, I know that, you know, their strength of schedule, I think somewhere around 150. They haven't played the great competition that an Arkansas has, but they're hitting 300 as a team. They're pitching to an under 3 ERA. They've stolen 119 bases, and they have a guy on their team with 21 home runs. So that's plenty to scare the coaches, and they're not really willing to just mess with what's been working. So Povich will throw Friday. I'd imagine Chance Roach, the graduate transfer, would throw the next game, whether that be against NJIT or Arkansas, depending on the result. But, yeah, Nebraska's going to stick on schedule, and they'll have Povich, who was a first-team All-Big Ten pick and been really consistent for the Huskers. A left-hander will throw against Northeastern, a team who hit 12 home runs in their conference tournament coming down to Fayetteville.
I wanted to ask you, too, about Spencer Schwellenbach. Looks like he's the closer. Numbers look really impressive this season.
Spencer's a special kid. I mean, first of all, he's a great individual. Comes from a great family, a very athletic family. His older brother's playing college baseball right now, just wrapping up his career as a 5th-year senior. And, you know, Spencer is a guy that was one of the highest, you know, recruited players in Nebraska history when he came here. And obviously drafted out of high school by the Indians, chose to come to Lincoln. And, you know, he's been wanting to pitch since he got here, but he's been dealing with some elbow problems, and he finally had some surgery to clean that up. And his arm finally got to a point where they felt comfortable pitching him. And he's been brilliant. He's touched 99 on the gun this year. He's got an absolute hammer of a breaking ball, and he's been rock solid, for Nebraska. He's basically, I've been telling people down in Arkansas, he's our version of Kevin Kopps, except he also bats third and plays shortstop. So he's a Swiss Army knife like Jackson Hallmark. He does everything. He's a projected first round pick, and scouts are playing tug of war on where they want to draft him, both as a shortstop or as a pitcher. And I think that just speaks to his ability to do both. Usually when you have the two-way players, it's, well, he's a little better with the bat or he's a little better with the arm. And I think scouts are still trying to figure that out. He's our best defender, obviously has a great arm at shortstop, and he's our three-hole batter for a reason. I think his average is pushing 300 as well. He's been kind of up and down, but he still finds a way on base even when he's not going well offensively. And he's one of those captains, one of those leaders that we talk about. He's been, our everyday starter at shortstop since he's been here. And, unfortunately for Nebraska fans, his career is going to end, in a regional or in a super regional, or, if they're lucky enough, a College World Series. But it's been an unbelievable career to follow, and I would expect to see him in a big league uniform pretty soon.
One more thing I want to ask you about, Ben, before we let you go. I would assume that none of the teams that are coming into Fayetteville this year, Nebraska, Northeastern, or NJIT, have seen anything from an attendance standpoint like they're going to see this weekend. Regional tickets are sold out. There's going to be, at least for the Arkansas games, between 11 and 12,000 people at all the games. Nebraska's probably played in front of the most fans of the teams that are visiting this weekend. What have crowds been like for Nebraska games, both home and away, and how different will this be this weekend, what they're going to see at Baum?
Well, away games have been, family and friends, and that's it. We're lucky to get a couple hundred in there. But Nebraska did have over 7,000 fans in their home games last weekend against Michigan. So they are used to playing in front of a lot of people. Now, the big difference is instead of a bright red color, they're going to be wearing a maroon color and be rooting against you. And that's a little bit different. They haven't faced that type of atmosphere this year of the crowds cheering for the other team. But just in terms of seeing the bodies, feeling the energy at the ballpark, I don't think the team will be shook by that like an NJIT or Northeastern will. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing's going to be when those Pig Suey chants are raining down and, the things are going against you. Things are going to get pretty loud, and, how you handle your emotions is going to be a big thing for any team, and as you know, once you get further and further in these regionals, the pressure mounts, and, some of these kids have never been in this type of situation before, playing playoff baseball. And you just got to find a way to handle your emotions and stay focused and stay within yourself. And Nebraska's not going to be immune to that, even though they have played in front of big crowds this year.
All right. Well, Ben, we appreciate your time and hope you have a safe trip down I-29 and I-49 to Fayetteville.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Our thanks to Ben McLaughlin from the Nebraska Radio Network. He mentioned that Cade Povich is going to start for Nebraska in Game 1. NJIT has named Tyler Stafflinger their Game 1 starter. I haven't seen who Northeastern is going to start Game 1, but I don't know that it matters for them because they've got like 3 pitchers who have really, really good numbers this year. And so I think they might be able to mix and match a little bit better. Cam Schlittler is probably their number 1 pitcher, though. And I've seen him on some All-America ballots that have come through my inbox in the last few days. I think he's got a sub-2 ERA, one of the top whips in the country. Really, really good pitcher at Northeastern. But as a staff, they pitch really well. I think they've got the number 3 team whip in the country. Now, a lot of that, is based on who they play. You heard Joe Healy earlier talk about how their conference was split into divisions this year, and they basically played the 3 worst teams in the conference. It'd be kind of like if the SEC maybe split into pods this year and Arkansas got, Missouri and Auburn and Kentucky. I mean, it would be something like that, or A&M. So, Northeastern hasn't been real battle tested, but they have been to the tournament before. And a lot of these players that are on their roster have played in the NCAA tournament before. So for Arkansas, they're going to throw Caleb Bolden on Friday. No surprise there. My thought coming into this was that if NJIT was a predominantly right-handed hitting team, that you would see Caleb Bolden. If they were a predominantly left-handed hitting team, you'd probably see Lyle Lockhart. And they'll say Patrick Wicklander for Game 2, probably. I don't think that there's any guarantee that Wicklander is going to pitch Game 2, but I think there's a high probability that it's going to be him in Game 2.
Dave
Van
just
Horn,
said he would be left-handed and good.
and good. Yeah, exactly. So I mean that
narrows it down.
Yeah,
Maybe
I think it's
not enough.
Well, Lockhart has pitched well of late, but Wicklander obviously has turned himself into one of the best pitchers in the country. And when he threw in the last regional here in Fayetteville in 2019, he pitched really well against TCU, but then he struggled in the Super Regional against Ole Miss. Of course, we've gone through all the changes in his life, his personal life, that have probably made him a better pitcher, got his body more under control this year. But just thinking back to his regional appearance a couple of years ago, there are a lot of Arkansas pitchers who pitched in that regional, by the way. I mean, Kevin Kopps was on that team. Connor Noland was on that team. Caden Monk was on that team. There are a number of Arkansas pitchers who have got some postseason experience, and I don't think you can undervalue that at this time of the year.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. There's something to be said for experience. There's something to be said for guys that have gone through just the NCAA tournament field. There's as much as guys want to say that this is just another weekend, it's not. And I think if you're a baseball fan, you know that. When your season is on the line, there's heightened tensions. There's heightened tensions in the stands. A single in the third inning is going to get more cheers than a single in the third inning of a non-conference game or even a conference game during the season. So to have guys that are been through that and understand that, hey, just because I give up a single in the third inning and their entire dugout is going crazy, like that doesn't matter. And there's also the weird things of you might have to switch dugouts at your home stadium. Yeah. You might have to do all that weird stuff. You might be the away team at there's Baum Walker. There's just so many things that are different, even though you get to be at home. To have guys that have gone through it can't be understated.
I think they've changed the rule. I don't think you have to change your home dugout anymore, but you can still be the visiting team.
Okay.
Even if it's on your home field. I think that's how that works.
They need to change that for softball then. I don't know if you noticed that when watching the softball team. Yeah. They're in their regional, and I know for sure in their super regional, they were on that first base side. It's just strange.
Yeah, of course, but softball and baseball are different sports. I preach this to the choir all the time. They've got different committees. And
yes, they definitely are. It's just something like that seems like they could fix that.
I think they changed that, though, in baseball a couple of years ago. Speaking of the dugout, it looks like Brady Slavens will be in the dugout for at least game one against NJIT. Sprained his ankle last week against Georgia. He's not going to play in the opener. Zebulon Vermillion is going to be out for the regional, although Dave Van Horn, kind of tongue-in-cheek moment, said that he's not out for the season. So obviously we know what he means, but if they get past the regional, they think Zebulon Vermillion could potentially get back onto the mound for them in a game. Slavens, I don't know what to think about with him out. I thought Colin Smith filled in really, really well for him last week at the SEC tournament. Smith should have been on the All-SEC tournament team. I think he should have been the SEC tournament MVP.
That was tough.
Yeah. So, by the way, that was a media vote, and I didn't see my ballot until, I don't know, like an hour, 2 hours after the final game. By that point, the voting was shut down. And I kind of think that there were a lot of Tennessee beat writers who voted in that, which would explain why there were so many Tennessee players who were on it. But not only that, why Jalen Battles was the MVP. He played well in Hoover, but I thought throughout the 3 or 4 games that Arkansas played there that Smith was really the one who stepped up and kind of led them, at least from an offensive standpoint. But Smith has played well. I thought he gave Arkansas Slavens-like production at the plate in the 4 games in Hoover. He was 5 for 14, hit 3 home runs, had 7 RBI, scored 7 runs, took a couple of walks, I believe. And he said after the championship game against Tennessee that he feels like he's really swinging it as well as he has since he got to Arkansas. Was a really good hitter at East Tennessee State. And by the way, he faced Tyler Stafflinger when he was at East Tennessee State in 2019 and hit a home run off of him. So when he steps into the batter's box against the NJIT starter on Friday, it won't be the first time those two guys have seen each other. In fact, he faced him 3 times during that game a couple of years ago and went 1 for 2 and drew a walk and had 4 RBI against him.
Yeah, that's a good find by you, by the way. That's pretty interesting. But I agree. The fact that he was left off of the All-SEC tournament team is wild, and I agree that he probably should have been the MVP. But I didn't like I don't know if it was a narrative or what was being brought up by the SEC network announcers. I ended up, most of the time anyway, I turned the TV off and just listened to the radio broadcast, because I feel like Phil and Bubba can give like insights into the team maybe that I didn't see. And I actually really do enjoy, Bubba and his, all right, this is like a 2-1 pitch. So, he's thinking all this kind of stuff because he hits. So I enjoy that more so, and you can get more of that on the radio broadcast. But the SEC network guys really were pushing the fact that Caden Wallace hadn't played third base all year long. And that's not a story. That's Wallace's natural position. It should be more of a story that he's playing right field than the fact that he's playing third. And so I didn't buy that. And then, Ethan Bates is a fantastic hitter. You saw against Vanderbilt that he got that single that got Arkansas on the board. And Van Horn has said he's got power, and he just hasn't shown it on display yet. So I don't have a problem bringing him in. Goodhart playing the outfield at times. I'll be interested to see if Webb is back to full playing time and availability this regional. I would assume probably he would, but nothing was said about that. And so I think that Wallace at third and Smith at first is probably the way to go moving forward.
I don't think Webb played so much for a disciplinary reason as the fact they faced a lot of right-handed pitching when they were in Hoover. Goodhart didn't look real comfortable to me playing left field. And so I wonder if we'll see that in the regional. To your point, Caden Wallace, I think you're right that one of the stories of this year that has been maybe overlooked a little bit has been how well he has played in right field, a position that I don't believe he had really played before he got to Fayetteville. And I think he will be a third baseman or an infielder of some sort moving forward in his career, but he's played right field really well this season.
And just thinking about that, I remember back to an early game, and it may have been a game that Arkansas lost in the non-conference, Matt. There weren't very many of those. But there was a ball hit down the right field line, and Caden Wallace was running towards it, and it ended up going foul, but he dropped it. And I think it came back to hurt the Razorbacks. It was a game at Baum-Walker Stadium. I can't remember exactly. But I remember Dave addressing it in the postgame of, hey, this is just a guy that hasn't played right field. He's like, I got a freshman out in right that hasn't played there before. So, yeah, the drops like that are going to happen early in the season. But you don't see that anymore. He seems to be very comfortable out in right field now, and you don't really have a problem with him knowing where the wall is, knowing where the foul line is, all that kind of stuff. So I agree that it's not a storyline. Wallace will be in the game, and he can play third base just fine.
If Arkansas wins the regional, they're going to be paired up against the winner of the Ruston Regional. And that regional includes Louisiana Tech. We saw them earlier this year. That's a really good team. I think Arkansas is a lot better than they were when they went to Ruston earlier this year. And I think playing them in Fayetteville might yield a different kind of result than you saw in Ruston. Or maybe different kind of games might be the right way to say that. Of course, they weren't throwing Patrick Wicklander as a starter at that point. I believe he came in as a relief pitcher and kind of struggled.
Was
in
that
Ruston.
Vermillion's longest outing too?
He had back-to-back outings of 8 innings against Louisiana Tech and Alabama. Alabama's another team in Ruston. And so you've got the potential there if Arkansas wins, if Alabama were to upset in the Ruston Regional, that you could have another all-SEC Super Regional. I don't see that happening. I think Louisiana Tech or North Carolina State will probably come out of Ruston. NC State's a team that's always kind of been kind of intriguing to me because they just kind of always seem like they're hanging around, in that top 20, top 25 area, not just this year, but most years. And I believe their coach is one of the longest tenured coaches in college baseball. In fact, as a lot of these coaches have been stepping down here in the past few weeks. Kennesaw State's longtime coach stepped down. Paul Maneri, of course, is leaving LSU. I believe, if I've looked at this right, I think Dave Van Horn and the North Carolina State coach will be 2 of the 6 longest tenured coaches in Division I at that point. Or maybe not longest tenured, but the most wins among Division I coaches. So that would be kind of an interesting matchup if NC State ended up in Fayetteville. Of course, you got to win your regional first. Mm-hmm. The Razorbacks have got to get past these teams. But it does feel like it's a very winnable regional for Arkansas. It's maybe not the easiest regional that they could have been given.
Right.
But I don't feel like it's in any way the hardest. I kind of thought if Oklahoma State were to come over here as a number 2 seed, that might be more problematic for Arkansas than, say, like a Nebraska.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the Big Ten champion was put in with another champion. I figure you'd put the 5 power conference champions in different regionals. But, yeah, for the sake of Arkansas, I'd rather place Nebraska than Oklahoma State. So I'm kind of with you there. The NJIT, I think that's a pretty good matchup. Like, they're not – I thought that the last time Arkansas played a 4 in Central Connecticut, you're talking about in 2019, they had a player, I can't remember what his name is now, but he was a good player that hit, I think, 3-hole for them.
Talking about the outfielder?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I know you're talking about. I can see his face.
They were a decent 4 seed and could make some noise. I don't know that much about NJIT besides what I've listened to their coach and all his interviews this week. So that'll be interesting. And then, Northeastern is no pushover either. I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas faces them at some point in this tournament. So it'll be an interesting weekend. Like you said, you got to win your first matchup, or you got to win your first weekend to get to the second weekend. But I just love regional weekend, Matt. It's a lot of fun. There's not a whole lot of things that can rival the NCAA tournament in basketball, and I'm not going to compare the two because they're not equal, but still the first weekend of college baseball is fun just to see the upsets happen, teams that you didn't think could win or had a shot win games. And the crazy thing about baseball is that those teams can lose or win and still not make it or to the next round and things like that. So it's interesting. I enjoy it, and I enjoy keeping up with it, and it's always fun, especially because Arkansas is normally pretty good.
T.T. Bowens.
Yes,
that was the Central Connecticut State player.
Yep. Yes, he was good. Did he get drafted?
I don't think so. I think he was looking for a home in the transfer portal last summer. I don't know whatever happened to him. I do think that maybe he expressed some interest in Arkansas. I don't know exactly how that went. He seemed like he was a fan favorite when he got here. I think Northeastern is maybe the team to watch this weekend out of the 3 visitors because of the way that Northeastern can pitch. And then, of course, they've got some guys in their lineup that have shown some power this year. And here's the other note I want to make about Northeastern is that Northeastern played at Wake Forest, Northeastern played at Old Dominion, and they won games against both of those teams. And so I think that's to me, that's a little bit of an eye-opener, that they went to an Old Dominion and won a game and were competitive in that series. And Old Dominion's a national seed. So I think Northeastern could be an interesting team to watch this weekend in Fayetteville. Well, we'll be back next week. We don't know what we'll be doing. Will we be recapping the regional, looking ahead to a super regional? Will we be recapping the season if Arkansas gets upset in their home regional? We don't know. Number 1 seed has not lost its home regional since 2015. UCLA lost to Maryland that year, and it's only happened 3 times since 1999 that a number 1 seed has lost in its home regional. We mentioned the 07 Vanderbilt season, and the only other time it happened was in 2014. Oregon State lost to Cal Irvine in its home regional. So very unlikely, we feel like, that Arkansas will lose this weekend. But, hey, it's sports. You never know what's going to happen.
That's why you play, right?
Yep.
And T.T. Bowens, he's in the Orioles organization.
Okay.
He's with the GCL Orioles right now. He was signed a minor league contract in June of last year.
Okay. All right. So he never ended up playing for another college team. All right. Arkansas and NJIT on Friday. We will have a ton of coverage at WholeHogSports.com. We hope you'll join us there. We'll also have coverage from the other games, Nebraska and Northeastern on Friday night at 7 o'clock, and whatever other games might be played throughout this weekend. For Seth Campbell, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next week on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.